what is the difference between psychopathy, sociopathy, and antisocial disorder? And then the other question was, what the heck is Machiavellianism in the dark triad? Okay, wow, good questions. So according to Dr. Scott Bond in Psychology Today, the difference between sociopathy and psychopathy in his article on how to tell a sociopath from a psychopath is that experts disagree on whether there are any major differences between the two conditions. They're saying basically that there's no difference between psychopathy and sociopath, and it now falls under the Diagnostic Manual 5, the DSM-5. It falls under Antisocial Personality Disorder. And basically, so what he's basically saying is it's just terminology. It's the old terminology was psychopathy, then it became sociopath, and now it's antisocial personality disorder. They are all pretty much the same. There are minor differences, not a lot. Antisocial is also socio and psychopath. Failure to conform to social norms, failure to respect others' rights or social mores. Deceitfulness, as indicated by repeated lying, use of aliases, or conning others for profit or personal pleasure. Sometimes they do things just because they get their jollies off of it, not because they're going to necessarily get monetary benefit out of it, but because they enjoy hurting somebody. Impulsivity, or failure to plan ahead. Irritability and aggressiveness, is indicated by repeated physical fights or assaults. Reckless disregard for safety of self or others. Consistent irresponsibility, as indicated by repeated failure to sustain consistent work behavior or honor financial obligations. Lack of remorse, as indicated by being indifferent or rationalizing having hurt, mistreated, or stolen from another. So those three terms are all pretty much interchangeable, okay, with very, very minor differences. So there really is no difference between psychopathy, sociopath, and antisocial. The new term is antisocial, and it does fall under the antisocial personality disorder. If you want more information on it, please go to Psychology Today. Look up Dr. Scott Bond. He has several articles on sociopaths, psychopaths, and antisocial.
When men go bad, they often go bad by being antisocial and tyrannical. So, where there's way more antisocial men than there are antisocial women, which is why there's 20 times as many men in jail as there are women. So each gender, let's say each sex, has its own characteristic pathologies. And there are some antisocial women, and there are some high neuroticism guys or some guys who are really agreeable as well. So, but they're rarer. You might say, well, if you're only going to interact with someone once, you might as well just take advantage of them and run off. That's what a psychopath does, by the way. And there is room in the environmental niche for psychopaths, but they have to keep moving around, because otherwise people figure out who they are. So they just move around, and they can take advantage of one person, maybe 5 times or 10 times or something. And then the reputation spreads and they got to get the hell out of there. So it's not a good long-term strategy. If you're preyed upon by a psychopath, which you will be to some degree at some point in your life, the psychopath, who will be narcissistic, will presume that you're stupid and that you deserve to be taken advantage of because you're naive and stupid. So it's actually a good thing that he's doing it. And his proof for, and I'm saying he because there are more male psychopaths, the proof that you're stupid, naive, is that he can take advantage of you. And so, like, if you were wiser, you'd be, you'd know his tricks, and then it wouldn't be morally necessary for him to show you just exactly who knows what about what. And so the psychopath will use his ability to fool you as proof of his own grandiose omnipotence, omniscience, and narcissism. And the problem with that is that you can be fooled by a psychopath, and virtually anybody can. So that Robert Hare, for example, who studied psychopaths for a long time and interviewed a lot of them, like hundreds of them, and videotaped many of the interviews, he said when he was talking to the psychopath, he always believed what they were saying. And then he'd watch the video afterwards and see where the conversation went off the rails. But, the proclivity to be polite in a conversation is very strong. And if you're polite, you don't object to the way that the person unfolds their strategy, And psychopaths are pretty good at figuring out how to manipulate, obviously, how to manipulate people. And the probability that you will be immune to that is extraordinarily low. Go watch Paul Bernardo being interviewed by policemen on YouTube. That's bloody, that's enlightening, man. Paul Bernardo, he's like the CEO of a meeting in that video, you know? He gives the cops hell, he gives the lawyers hell, he protests his innocence. He basically tells them that they're rude and untrustworthy because they don't trust him because he did a few little things 17 years ago. But he basically goes, well, you know, that's a long time ago. It's like, we're past that, aren't we? I mean, I'm having a discussion with you. I'm trying to help you solve some crimes, which, by the way, I committed. But we won't bring that up, you know. And you're accusing me of being a liar. Like, you're not playing fair. What's up with you? And then when they answer, he looks at his fingernails, which is like, that's a lovely little manipulative thing, because it basically means whatever happens to be under my fingernail at the moment is much higher priority than listening to your foolish story. And you watch, you'll see people do that to you. And then you get a little insight into what they're up to. He's very good at that. And so, or he looks outside, or he just looks at his hands, or he looks out the window, immediately dismissive in his nonverbal behavior. It's brilliant. The courts were forced to release that, by the way. But look it up, Paul Bernardo on YouTube. Wow.
But I just want to make sure that you understand that what you're saying here is voluntary, and that you're interviewing you as a potential witness. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
The police wasn't specific enough to identify any offenses. Now, that's something that we can talk about sort of following this interview. If you want to get into that, we can talk about that.
Well, I've been sitting with this for years, and it's written on my file, and it seems like, oh, it's just this crazy. You guys love doing that. I'm this crazy psychopathic liar. Why was that statement an issue? Why didn't you come in and talk to me? We were waiting. That tape, you play that tape back. If I asked you guys if you were going to come in, I sat there, month after month after month. No one came. Turned on the TV in September. Declared that Paul Bernardo was, this crazy liar to police. What's the fundamental problem?
Well,
I mean, justice the Canadian way, and no one comes in, and now you guys are saying that you didn't have enough information.
Well, I can't answer for them specifically as to what they did or didn't do. I can tell you that because they're a separate police department, I don't have any control over what investigation that they did do. I can tell you that I have spoken with an investigator in Peel region, and they have told me that at this point they don't have enough information.
I'm a liar, I'm not a liar. I'm not a liar. But you guys are trying to paint this way. Public, according to the public, they turned on the TV in September of last year. I was this crazy liar. That's what the TV reported. And not only did they report it there, they wrote it on my file. I've got it right myself. Paul Bernardo, Phil Neufeld said Paul Bernardo lied to police about prior to the committing. He said he did. And I mean, that's just false. I mean, come on. Enough manipulation. You know what I mean? Either tell the truth or don't, otherwise the whole purpose of it is just stupid. Because if I'm this crazy liar, I'll be just sitting here lying to you later, right? Right? I mean, why wouldn't I? I'm just this crazy liar.
But look it up, Paul Bernardo on YouTube. Wow, it's just mind-boggling. He's so good at what he does. And he's good-looking, and he's charismatic, and, he can really pull it off. And you can't tell what's happening with the cops and the lawyers, whether they're just letting him play his routine to get some information from him, or whether he's actually setting them back on his heels. And I suspect it's a bit of both. But it's masterful performance. If you didn't know who he was, and you were watching it without the audio, you'd think he's the CEO of some company giving his employees hell for not being up to scratch. That's all his body language, his eye contact, everything just speaks that. It's amazing. And breaking.
The other thing that you need to keep in mind too is the way Hollywood has portrayed psychopathy and antisocial is not necessarily true. Not all antisocial or sociopaths or psychopaths are serial killers. They're not. They oftentimes get through life quite nicely without actually killing anybody. Unfortunately, if they become part of the dark triad and they are in an abusive relationship, they use that lack of remorse, they use that no empathy to manipulate their victim and to do the things that they do and not feel anything about it. So now let's go into the dark triad. Okay, so the dark triad is Machiavellianism, narcissism, psychopathy, or antisocial. Okay. Machiavellianism. What the heck is Machiavellianism? Okay. Machiavelli was a philosopher and he wrote a book called The Prince. And basically his contention is that things like honesty and honor and virtue and all of those good things were expendable if deceit, treachery, and force would be more expedient to your ends, to rule the kingdom, basically. In psychology, Machiavellianism is a personality type. It's not that they choose to be, it simply is. And they are a master manipulator. They are very calculating, very conniving, very duplicitous, very deceptive, very controlling things, very much control freaks, want to make sure that all the pieces are in motion and they have control over all of them, and they're very, very conniving. And so that is what Machiavellianism is. It's that control freak kind of thing. So when you hear Machiavellian, I want you to think control freak. So that is the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and antisocial psychopathy / sociopath. And that is a really bad combination. And sadly, that is what we are up against, or you are up against, if you have a family or a friend who is in an abusive relationship, is you're probably dealing with either a dark triad or one of the personality disorders. And again, guys, I am talking the malignant end. I am not talking the traits of end. I am talking the malignant end, where people are getting hurt, either emotionally, physically, or otherwise. So if you have a family member or a friend who is in an abusive relationship, I've said it before, I'll say it again, and I'm going to keep saying it. Read up everything you can on Psychology Today. Dr. Scott Bond has several really good articles on sociopathy, antisocial, psychopaths, etc. The one on Machiavellianism is also on Psychology Today, and it's by Dale Hartley, also a doctor. Read up as much as you can on what the dark triad is. I just kind of explained it. What they think like, what they do, because this is how they will behave. And this is why it's really important that you read up, especially if you're trying to help somebody get out of one of these relationships, that you read up as much as you can on the dark triad, on narcissism, on personality disorders, on Machiavellianism. You need to understand that these people that do this, that are abusive, that harm their partners, that harm their children, that harm the people around them, that are dealing with a high level of the malignant end of the spectrum, they will not stop. They won't. They are invested in getting their needs met at any cost, and you need to understand how they think so you can stay a step ahead of them while you're helping your person out. And you educate that person as much as you can on these things so they understand, this is why this person's doing this. It's not anything you did. This is why this person is doing this, that type of thing. So anyway, that is the dark triad. That is antisocial, psychopathy, and psychopath. There's no difference. They're pretty much interchangeable, and it's just terminology, and experts agree as to the minuscule little differences between them. If you don't believe me, look it up in the DSM-5. If you don't believe me, go on to Psychology Today. So that is that. A person will... The other question I got regarding this was, when does a person start showing signs of this? Well, in order to be diagnosed with antisocial, you have to have had conduct disorder before the age of 15. So they will have had problems with the law, or they will have had odd relationships or things going on. They have to be diagnosed before age 15 in order to have antisocial disorder or personality disorder. So conduct disorder comes first, then antisocial personality disorder is the diagnosis after the age of 18. Usually they'll be in trouble with the law. They'll have some, shoplifting or arson or, things like that. Not always, but usually. So they'll lie about their past. They'll lie about what the trouble they've gotten into with the law, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that. Okay, so I hope that answered that question. There is no difference between those. The person will have shown signs, and it also depends on how charming they are. Because remember, psychopaths, not all antisocial personality disorders, not all of them are serial killers. Oftentimes they can be charming. They can be charming antisocial. They can be charming sociopaths, charming psychopaths. And they've learned how to mimic the appropriate response and how to get people onto their side using charm. And that's the scary thing, is that's how they're able to fool their victims, and that's how they're also able to fool the family members for a while until things start getting really bad with the charm. So be aware of anybody who is overly charming or who appears to be trying to win you onto their side, especially if you know somebody is being abused or you suspect they're being abused, because that's probably the sign of somebody who is a charming antisocial sociopath, psychopath. Okay, that's that.
At the extreme end, we have malignant narcissists, and usually they're also psychopathic, so we have psychopathic narcissists. That's these people, and that's a small minority. I wouldn't say negligible, but small minority of people. These people tend to lack empathy. They are unethical to the point of being criminal. They're exploitative, they're abusive, etc., etc. So yes, it's an entire spectrum. Moreover, it depends on the social and cultural context within which one operates. So if you have cultures and societies which encourage narcissistic traits and behavior and reward them, naturally this would tend to render people more narcissistic. So take for instance Western culture, or more specifically American culture or Anglo-Saxon culture, where ambition is rewarded. Certain types of unethical behaviors are not frowned upon or even encouraged. Empathy is limited by choice and by design, and so on. So these societies inevitably would tend to single out and encourage narcissists, and then people would tend to emulate them and become more and more narcissistic. In other societies, such as Japan, for instance, and so on, there is collective narcissism, but not individual narcissism. So people would channel their narcissism through the collective. So people would channel their narcissism through the collective. They would be proud to belong to
and to be the
a winning
best
team,
of the best country coming up.
Right, the best of via the collective.
Mm-hmm.
So we have collective narcissism. Narcissism is inevitable. It's everywhere. Everyone is, to this or that extent, a narcissist. The test is the question of harm, the question of ethics, and the question of empathy, above all, the question of empathy. Are you able to empathize despite the fact that you seek self-gratification? Despite the fact that you are in need of narcissistic supply? Are you ruthless? Are you relentless? Do you trample over people? Do you abuse? Do you exploit? Can you sympathize with other people's needs, priorities, emotions, fears, and so on? If the answer is, I can't, I have no empathy, then you are a malignant narcissist. All narcissists treat other people as objects.
Right.
But not all people who treat other people as objects are narcissists.
Right.
So we have, for instance, sexual sadists. Mm-hmm. Sexual sadists derive an intense sense of pleasure from inflicting pain. Mm-hmm. And this has nothing to do with narcissism.
Right.
You do have narcissists who are serial killers, and they derive an intense sense of pleasure from their omnipotence, from their unlimited power over the subject of torture or subject of killing. So it all depends. You need to trace the psychodynamics of each and every case. No two serial killers are alike, for instance. So I would tend to think that children adopt mental health disorders as both shields and adaptive strategies in accordance with what works. And what works changes in time and with the children.
Yeah, and as the abuse changes
and as the abuse, everything changes. It's not a static situation.
Yeah.
Parents who are, for instance, psychopaths or sadists, who tend to perfect the abuse. They would render it more subtle, more stealthy, ambient abuse. Some of them would discover that they can use other people to abuse. So there is abuse by proxy. They enlist and recruit other people to do their bidding. Others would grow old and will ameliorate, and their psychopathic and narcissistic qualities will disappear gradually. So the last child will not have been abused, while the first two have been abused, etc., etc. So this is not a static situation, it's a river, and one can never enter the same river twice, so one can never have the same solution to abuse.
Sociopathy.
Can we define that?
Sure.
Just basic.
So the more common term is a sociopath. So sociopathy is the condition of being a sociopath. Sociopaths are individuals that have very low capacity for empathy. They do not display normal love. They do not appear to experience remorse. They may experience regret. You know, a person, if you back your car into something, you will feel regret whether you're a sociopath or not, because you have to deal with the aftermath. But, you know, if you run over somebody's pet, if you're normal, you will feel terrible at the pain you've caused, and if you're a sociopath, you may feel very little beyond annoyance.
Do you think that that's a disorder?
No, I think it makes very little sense to think of it as a disorder, and I'll tell you why. I mean, the first thing is the commonality of it. So it seems to be that somewhere between 1% and 4% of the population is sociopathic. And that's a very high number for a disorder. And it could be that you have something like, you know, lead in the water could cause 1 to 4% of the population to be, you know, mentally retarded in some recognizable way, but you wouldn't find it broadly distributed across an entire culture in this way. It's also true that we see sociopaths, in many regards, rising to the top of economic hierarchies and political hierarchies. So it's conspicuous that something that we have wanted to label as a disorder seems to be like a superpower for a certain number of people. So disorder is probably not the right category. I also think we draw too starkly the line between sociopaths and the rest of us. I think essentially all of us are sociopathic in some regards with respect to some things, and probably we have to be this way. So we will all recognize that we can hear about the suffering of a population that is remote from us, either in space or in time, and we can feel very little, even if in the abstract what is happening to that population is frightening or abhorrent to us. We may be able to hear about it and then go on about our day, go buy a coffee or whatever, where we could have had our lives pivot around the discovery that there were people suffering, and yet it only captures our attention momentarily. So that strikes me as the experience of being sociopathic, largely because the population that we're talking about is too far for us to do anything productive, and so it wouldn't make sense for us to feel the emotion deeply, because it would be disruptive of things that we actually do have influence over.
Patterns and symmetry. It made me think about paintings and patterns in paintings, and I immediately thought about, it's silly, but the movie Clueless, 90s teen movie where Alicia Silverstone says something about Monet, about from far away it's okay, but up close it's a big old mess. And I thought, okay, I'll send them a draft and I'll say something, I'm going to talk about Monet and patterns, and I'm going to relate it to my research. And then I was like, I can change it later. And then they shared it on Facebook and said, Luna's going to be talking about Monet and comparing it to psychopathic traits. And I was like, okay, I'm committed to that. So hopefully I've made my talk a little bit more clever rather than clueless for you, but we shall see. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about Monet paintings and kind of relate it to my research. So if you look at a Monet painting, for example, or an impressionistic painting, you can see that there are patterns in it, and the paintings and colors look quite uniform from far away. When you zoom up close, you can see that the pattern really breaks down, and you start to see individual dots, and you find some lonely dots. So for example, there's some blue dots within this beige uniform color, and up here you can see there's some purple dots in the blue. And actually, I study antisocial behavior and problem behaviors in children, as I said. Conduct problem behaviors and antisocial behaviors in young children are also very costly, not only in terms of juvenile justice costs, but also lost educational and job opportunities for young people who persistently get into trouble, but also the cost of possibly taking children out of their home and into care if the parents cannot control their behavior.
There was no structure or routine to Barbara's day at all with the children. Alright, you guys, she's got so many hours with the girls and she doesn't know what to do with them. I'm not a dumb. They get bored, they end up fighting with one another. Andrew tends to dominate and lead the play. Andrew and Sharon at the moment, they don't mix. She's also very aggressive. She hits her twin sisters. That kind of behaviour is just not acceptable and it has to be addressed.
So these problem behaviors are quite costly and something to pay attention to. And when we think about children who show conduct problem behaviors, we might think that they're all pretty much the same and that they show uniform kind of behaviors, same kind of motivation for their behaviors, same kind of personality characteristics and features might underlie these conduct problem behaviors when you look at it from far away. However, if you zoom up close, we know that not all of them are the same. Some of them are quite unique. They're the few amongst the larger array of uniformly colored patterns. And I'm interested in these few kind of individuals. So luckily these are the few, but they show a persistent problem behavior that's more aggressive and tend to not feel bad when they do things wrong and just don't have a conscience for having done bad behavior. In my early work, I found that there were children, again, few, that remained cool and kind of not bothered when they performed an aggression task where they were playing and competing against a fake opponent. So I had them do this task in my research. Okay, so you would hear something like, I'm going to do a male voice. Man, you're so slow, my grandma could beat you. That's going to cost you 100 points. So when you hear a provocation message like that, especially when you're playing this competitive game, your heart might go beat faster, you might sweat from your palms, you might experience anger and kind of hot-headedness about it. So those are normal reactions that most of us might feel. In my research, I found that there were some who stayed kind of cool as a cucumber at the same time that they were really aggressive. So their hearts didn't really react, their sweating really didn't go up. And again, these were a few individuals within the larger population of people that had problem behaviors. They also tended to show particular characteristics. So in terms of psychopathic traits, they were less caring about the feelings of other people, less caring about other people's values. They didn't have empathy for other people and couldn't kind of share in other people's emotional expressions. So, you know, these psychopathic traits tended to kind of delineate a certain kind of individual. These were the few amongst the... Now, one thing in my field of research that we know is that the juxtaposition of, you know, people and their environments is also important. So the thought is that being a bad child is because you're with a bad parent, for example. So we know that targeting and showing parents how to respond better to child problem behaviors is an effective way to affect change in that problem behavior over time. So targeting the parent, we know that it changes the parent's behavior. So in that way, we think that perhaps the parent is a cause of the problem behavior. If we change the parent, the child changes, perhaps the parent was the cause after all. So that juxtaposition of a child with a particular parent may be quite important. The environment in which the child is growing up may be very important in terms of the influence on that child. So that led us to kind of look at clinical populations of kids to kind of understand where their problem behaviors come from. And again, we know that, or we think that, parents' behavior is a huge contributing factor to the problem behaviors in those kids. But there was a really cool study done where they took children with problem behaviors. These were children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and they gave them to other parents, parents of children who didn't have problem behaviors. Now, it was only temporary, it wasn't like forever, but they gave them to these new parents. And so really that juxtaposition of having a new parent with that problem behavior child should yield good behavior from that child. Actually, what happened was the parents tended to respond negatively to that child's problem behavior. So the old adage, you're driving me crazy, could actually hold water. Actually, the juxtaposition could work the other way. So it could be, one way, is that the parents' problem behaviors, or the parents' problem parenting, is maybe an action that is causing the child's problem behavior. But we could actually think of it as a reaction as well. So it could be that the poor parenting that we see from parents is actually a reaction to the child's problem behavior. And this is not an entirely new idea. We do know from influential research that when you have kind of I called the other one a cool one, so we'll call this one kind of the hot child. We know that children who kind of push parents' buttons and push the boundaries of what they can get away with and have tantruming and, whining and crying, that parents sometimes respond in kind, or sometimes parents back away from kind of controlling that problematic child because it becomes so difficult. And over time, this process could unfold with the child pushing further and further. Maybe the second time, the parent tries to hold their ground. But with this escalation of problem behaviors from the child, from tantruming, the child learns, if I push just that bit further, my parent will back down and I'll get what I want. And I'm not saying that the child is doing this consciously and that they're trying to manipulate the situation. It's just learning that we all do. When we have a payout, for example, we would reenact that behavior over and over again to get that payout, to get what we want. And so this is a coercive process that is happening bidirectionally. There's a reciprocal process going on between the parent and child that is leading to this behavior. I mean, think about if you take a child to a supermarket, for example, and they want some toy or they want chocolate, and they start, crawling on the floor, crying and tantruming and screaming, and you have other parents watching you. For a parent, it's really uncomfortable to not want to give in to that situation. And a child then learns, if I just push those boundaries, especially when it's on public display, I might get what I want. Some children that are particularly attuned to the rewarding aspects of their problem behaviors. So they're aware of that payout and they kind of live for it. And these are children that, again, I argue are more cool and more kind of callous the way that they use other people, who don't feel for other people and lack emotional depth. We call these callous and unemotional traits. They're part of the psychopathic trait dimension. Callous unemotional traits have now been added to diagnostic criteria of clinical disorders from the American Psychiatric Association that mental health workers use. And what we know is that children with callous unemotional traits don't respond as much to parents' behaviors. And in that way, we almost think of them as being resilient. Now, usually resilience is a good thing. You're resilient to kind of resistant to bacteria, resilient to, stressful life events. But actually, these children might be more resilient in that they're not affected by their environment, which could be a negative thing. For the hot child, what we know is that the things that influence their problematic behavior are things like not being able to communicate effectively with other people, lacking in intellectual functioning or reasoning ability, We also know that it's related to, their problem behaviors might be related to poor parenting, being too harsh or being too lax in your parenting. But also their problem behaviors might result from, hanging around bad peers, for example. In contrast, the child who is more cool is actually more calculated in their behavior. So their problem behaviors, as I've shown in previous work of mine, is not related to poor intellectual functioning. They're pretty normal in intellectual functioning. They're able to reason quite well. They're able to communicate well. Their poor behaviors, recent research shows, is probably not related to hanging out with bad peers. So possibly it's motivated from their own kind of personality. And like I suggested, their problem behaviors, those who are high in callous unemotional traits are shown in the blue line, they're probably not related to poor parenting. So their conduct problem behaviors are not linked up to poor parenting, whereas the hot ones are. Instead of being affected by their environment, perhaps children with callous unemotional traits are changing their environment. So we could actually swap these around. So perhaps they're creating an environment in which their problem behaviors are just simpler to get away with. So I follow children and their parents over time and survey them about every year, since I'm looking at problem behaviors that are relatively infrequent. And I try to get the child's perspective and the parent's perspective in order to understand the dynamics unfolding within those relationships. And what I find, consistent with what I've been talking about, is that for those with low callous unemotional traits, the more that their parents are distressed, the more these children increase in their problem behaviors over time. So their parents' distress and feeling inefficient with their parenting is causing their problem behaviors to go up over time. For those with high callous unemotional traits, we don't find that. So for them, we actually find that the more that they engage in problem behaviors or have more conduct problems, parents tended to become more distressed over time based on those problem behaviors. Parents also became more erratic and less stable in their control. So, setting limits and having curfews and things like this, they tended to be more erratic if they had a child with callous unemotional traits. And lastly, if these children showed severe problem behaviors, if they had delinquent behavior, their parents even more reduced in their control or backed off in terms of
I'm going to talk to you about sociopaths. Although there are many other names or labels for this disorder, such as psychopaths or psychopathy, sociopath or sociopathy, or antisocial personality disorder, there are several key characteristics of sociopaths. The primary, and probably the most general, is a disregard for social norms. Sociopaths do not follow, nor think they should follow, the rules or the laws laid out in our society. Deceit and manipulation are central features in this disorder. People who are sociopathic or psychopaths lie, and they are natural at it. They are actors in their own life. Very few people really know who the psychopath is, because a psychopath presents an exterior, a facade, a form of their personality that they believe will get them what they want. Sociopaths are deeply egocentric and narcissistic. In fact, I believe sociopaths are among the most narcissistic individuals of all psychological and mental health disorders. They only think about themselves. When a sociopath acts as if they do care for someone, it's often a ruse. It's often meant to fool someone in order to get something from them. Strings are always attached. Sociopaths give as much as they have to in order to get what they want. Sociopaths are irresponsible. They often don't want to, nor are able to fulfill responsibilities deemed important by their loved ones, their employers, and their community. Because of their grandiosity and entitlement, they believe that they should not have to fulfill responsibilities and have to work or earn money for the purpose of other people. If asked, why do they do these harmful things to others? Why do they break the laws? Why do they hurt others? An answer could be, it's a dog-eat-dog world. You might as well get from other people before someone takes it themselves. And the sociopath only sees one way, and that is to get what they need, even if it hurts others around them. Sociopaths can often be aggressive and reckless. They're indifferent to the pain that they cause others. Sociopaths do not have the basic human emotion of empathy. They're unable, nor are they motivated to want to know how someone feels or how they feel as a result of the harm that they perpetrated against a victim. When asked about someone else's feelings, the sociopath just does not get it. It doesn't register. They may pretend or feign empathy in order to get what they want, or to fool someone into believing they're really human or have a full range of human emotions. Because sociopaths lack the basic human emotions, such as sympathy and empathy, they are incapable of forming relationships. They often are shallow and insincere in the expression of their emotions. They're callous and indifferent to the harm that they cause. However, they may pretend to be concerned. They may even charm or manipulate someone into believing that they actually do have these feelings of empathy and sincerity. Sociopaths have few friends because, first, they really don't want them. They do not have the internal motivation, the emotional motivation to make friends, because friendships for the sake of friendships do not mean anything to them. A friendship to them is a way to get what they need, to manipulate others in order to fulfill their own needs. Sociopaths are pathological liars. They're con artists. They will lie, they will steal, they will rip you off, and they do it believably.